Hi, and welcome to Nellie on the Sofa. I nearly said Nellie Supports, and I mean it is Nellie Supports, but this is Nellie on the Sofa. This is our first one for 2025. We skipped January. I needed a break, I'll be honest. Simple as that. We couldn't get it all organised. We are almost fully booked for the entire year, though. I think we've got October. We're looking for somebody, but there might be somebody cool and interesting come up between now and then. Welcome to everybody that's joined us. Thank you for joining us. We're incredibly lucky today. We've got Sean from Owl Guardian Services.
Hello.
I said it right.
Well done.
Thank you. Who is Owl Guardian Services are appointee and deputyship private service. So we're going to be talking about all things appointeeship and deputyship today. So I'm going to ask Sean the first question, and that's why do you exist? Why do you exist, Sean? Why do you exist?
We exist to support people in making financial decisions for themselves. Our Guardian Services have been around for 13 years. It was a company started by my mum, so I work with my mum. Like any cool dude.
Absolutely,
would. Yeah. She.
And my son comes in here. He's the office junior. You know, he's 9.
Similar. That's the similar thing. That's how I feel when I enter the office. It was my mum, Carol McCullough, who started the company. She was part of the deputyship team for Bucks Council for many, many years. Then retired. Then continued to be inundated with requests to go back in. It was a mistake. Yeah. And in the end, she just thought, wow, there's clearly a business here. So she set about starting up the company. She engaged with the cause protection. We had a lot of help from a brilliant guy called James Beatty. Who helped set up the company, gave advice around what the insurance requirements, what was needed.
Because your mum's really quite cool, isn't she? She is, isn't she? Do you know what I mean? Everyone else has sort of followed in her footsteps.
Yep,
she was involved in those initial conversations.
Not the first, but very much.
She was involved in those initial.
Very much one of the early, early on into the game, and we are. Probably the second oldest deputyship company in the country. There's I think one other who might be older.
And this is, she retired.
She did, yeah.
I mean,
she did.
All due respect.
She was retired. Yeah.
I love.
We won't talk about her age, but she was in her 60s when she started it up.
Yeah, and still is there. I have the impression of your mum. Whenever I hear this story, that on a Monday she finished work on the Friday, had the weekend off as is normal, and then on the Monday had a day at home, and then on Tuesday morning woke up and went, that's enough of that.
Indeed, she is a workaholic. She despairs of me because I certainly am not. But yeah, she'll be there till 7, 8 o'clock at night. She loves it.
She's still doing that.
Yeah, she absolutely loves it. Yeah,
But this is what I mean. We try to explain this to people in all aspects of social work. But if you stop, that's when everything gets worse. If you're still getting up and making yourself a cup of coffee, if you're still, even if it's tiny little things, that's impressive. Your mum, I think if she stopped tomorrow, I don't think it'd do her any good.
No, I don't. I agree.
I don't know whether it would do you any good.
No, it wouldn't. So she can't. But do you know? Look, she's mum. She's genuinely quite an inspirational figure. She comes bounding into the office, full of enthusiasm. She works harder, longer than anybody else. Even though we've got an amazing team, who work very, very, very hard.
Incredible.
But yeah, she's a tour de force, and it makes it easy to motivate people because of the
local authorities generally, traditionally, used to manage appointeeships.
Yes.
So I genuinely, think to go back to that first question, why do you exist? Why aren't the local authority just dealing with all
They
this?
still do, and initially. The company existed just to take on the overspill. Loads of local authorities they have teams. It's not a statutory duty.
Oh, okay.
So they do.
I always thought it was.
Yeah, it's not. So they do have teams, but usually they're fairly limited in terms of capacity and things. So they tend to have pending cases. That's where we came in. I have to say there is with the recent cuts and the general how things are in terms of the economy and things, that is changing because it's not a statutory duty. A lot of councils now are looking at potentially off-booking the entire case.
We've heard councils saying that, I think, was it Birmingham City Council? I could be wrong, so apologies to Birmingham City Council if I am, that said we can only provide what we are legally required to provide.
Yep.
So if not just appointeeships, but any non-statutory services, any services that they don't have to legally provide, are going to be cut.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we've been 3-4 years ago. We would sit down with local authorities, and we would be talking about 4, 5, 6 cases, that they had pending that they wanted support with. We sit down with them now, and they open on. We've got 50, we've got 100, and you're just sort of thinking, oh my god. So yeah, I think over the next 5 years, it will change dramatically.
Yeah.
In terms of moving towards privatisation.
I suppose, we've just seen a recent post the other day saying that there's a higher number of social workers employed this year than previous years. But that money's got to come from somewhere. Yeah. And if you've got local authorities that are struggling, but they're having to provide that statutory service of social work, where's the money coming from? The appointeeship team. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the thing.
I mean, and others, but so we're going to see an increase because local authorities can't afford to run these services anymore. You're seeing a natural increase from mental health difficulties.
Yeah, huge. I mean, it's a growing market, and that is quite I guess a sad reflection of how things are, but a really kind of terrible combination of. A move away from physical to digital banking, particularly for elderly people, represents a huge number of problems, increased problems with mental health, anxiety,
longevity.
Of course,
growing population.
Yeah, and just a dwindling of kind of public services as well, and also I guess to a certain extent the breakdown of the family unit, natural kind of family support.
Yeah,
and
I
things.
suppose if you went back to the 1950s, 1960s, if Grandad was ill, he'd come and live with son and daughter, and son and daughter would manage his money for him and things like that. Yeah. I mean, I suppose you could then end up with situations like in Japan when son and daughter are still claiming pension together when they're 110 years old and things like this.
We had sadly she passed away recently, but we had a mother and daughter. The mother was 104. The daughter was 88, I think, when she passed away. Is that right?
That's incredible.
It might be slightly different.
Elon Musk has just said a thing that there's people claiming American pension that are claiming to be 140 years old. How true that is, we will see.
It's a good pension system.
Yeah, it's not bad. Is it?
So it's a growing market, which, as I say, is in some is a bit of a sad reflection of how things are, but that is the way of the world at the moment. And I think there's a necessity for one of the things you're
seeing increases in not because traditionally appointeeships, deputyships, it was for acquired brain injury, it was for people with dementia, but you're seeing increases in anxiety and depression.
just depression, the anxiety, stress, just the stress of dealing with bills. I think one of the things, because it's gone digital, there's no respite. It's just it's on your phone, it's 6 inches away from your face, whereas before there would be bills. If you don't open the envelope, which was the way I used to manage my
running
bills.
a business. It's great. I get that notification. I know that somebody's paid, or somebody has paid me, or this or that, or now I'm getting notifications of you have this payment coming out in 3 days' time. For me, running a business, that's great. For me, as somebody that isn't running a business, I can't think of, for a normal person, for Joe Bloggs on the street, that's incredibly pressurised.
Yeah, And added to that, you have all the scams and the tech scams that come through, and it's just a very, very confusing, muddled world. And I think that has really exacerbated this kind of idea of stress and anxiety. And added to that, you're probably paying for more. The number of subscriptions and things you have is probably increased.
I don't even want to think about that. But there's a lot of subscriptions.
Traditionally, you think back to when we were growing up, you'd have had your gas, electric, and telephone bill, TV license, and that's probably about it. Or your mortgage. Or
I can remember my mum going down to the council offices to pay the council tax. Because it was paid in cash. So, I think the milkman, you used to leave a checkout for him in the milk bowl.
And now you've got Netflix subscription, your Amazon Prime, you've got all of this, and not to mention all. One of the things that we find now is people who are just, because of the games on phones and things, just the debts that they're accruing because they're addicted and they're vulnerable, and it says pay £2 and you get 5 minutes off your whatever you're building.
And that addiction,
and they can't help it.
Into that game.
And so people are accruing debts, and they're prioritising paying for a game instead of paying for their gas and electric and things.
Yeah, so we were talking to somebody about this the other day, that we see people with frontal temporal lobe paradox. And this young man was explaining that he knew that his telephone bill was due. He knew that he had £25 in the bank. He knew that the telephone was £25. He knew that if he didn't pay it, he would get cut off. But there was an Xbox game, and that was £25. And he knew that if he bought the Xbox game, he wouldn't be able to pay his telephone bill. And he knew that he'd get cut off. And he understood all of that. And then at the end of the conversation, he'd say, "So I want to buy the Xbox game, yeah?" Because he just he knew it, but he couldn't use it. He just couldn't use that information. He understood all of it. But I had a scam years ago. They rang up and said, "Isaac, Mr. Slater, there's a £217.48 tax bill outstanding. We need you to pay that." And I was like, "Oh, okay, is that personal? Is it my business? I'm a little bit lost on this." And they said, "No, it's your personal tax." I said, "Oh, okay. I'll have to check with my accountant and I'll get it paid. No issues." "Oh no, we need it paid today or we'll put a warrant out for your arrest." Which straight away, I mean, as soon as somebody says arrest, you panic anyway.
Yeah, of course.
It's like going through airport scary, isn't it? You're innocent, but dear God, you're guilty as hell.
Yeah.
But you've not done anything. So there was that moment of panic. Now, if I had severe anxiety, I mean, would I have just given over? If I'd had severe depression or anything like that, schizophrenia maybe, I might have just gone, "Oh, okay, here's my card details." I hadn't even, or alcoholism, drug abuse, anything
absolutely.
like that creates that vulnerability, I suppose.
We
and then had to live with that anxiety afterwards of having made that
decision,
terrible mistake, and then got another phone call,
and then it's
another
cyclical,
one,
absolutely.
Yeah.
We go to obviously we do a lot of training, go to a lot of talks about frauds and scams, and the simplest ones are so effective.
Yeah.
Like the one they were talking about now, it's a text. "Hi mum, it's your son. I've lost my phone, can't get home. Please send me £100. It's 2 in the morning. You're tired. Oh, okay, fine."
And in that text, they've answered all your questions. Well, why isn't it my son's phone? Well, he's already said I've lost my phone. Why haven't you got any money? Oh, well, I've lost my phone,
so
and that's how I pay
a different
for things
bank
now.
account.
Yeah.
And it's
so can you send it to my
super
friend's
common.
bank account because I haven't got my cards and I've had it all stolen, and £100's gone.
The other one is the HMRC one.
Yeah.
This is HMRC. You owe this. If you don't pay, then you'll receive £100 fine.
Yeah.
And everyone just thinks it's HMRC.
And it's never large amounts. It's not £20,000.
No, it's all small
it's
amounts.
£100, it's £50, things like that. Yeah.
But then they go to the other extreme where it's highly organised and they're willing to put some real effort and expenditure in it.
Yeah.
One of the cases they were talking about was so they phone up, they pretend to be the police. They ask you to go. They say you're at risk. You need to go into bank and withdraw your funds. They were telling us about a case in Wales where they got a woman to withdraw something like £100,000 out the bank over a number of days. She had it in cash at the house. They hired a Securical van with 2 guys in suits with the all the labels and
That's amazing.
Turned up, collected the cash. She never thought anything of it because of the level of professionalism.
I mean, we had a client who was doing day trading on a mobile phone. Was not particularly awful, not particularly wonderful at it. Somebody befriended her on this site, and he was copying her investments rather than the other way around. And then he joined a investment group, so she joined it alongside him. Invested £20,000 because that was the buy-in as such to this investment group, and lost it. And then the group disappeared.
Yeah.
He lost it as well because he was just a friend. You know, so he was in the US and he started up his own investment group. So she put £20,000 into that, and he disappeared, and the investment group disappeared. But then she got a phone call from the Royal Bank of Canada saying that we're a private bank and we've got your money. Don't panic. We've got it. We found out it was a scam. We've frozen the bank accounts. It's all done. If you set up your own bank account with us, we can then transfer the money that you've lost to your new bank account with us. But it has to be, because of the nature of private banking, it has to be with us. So you need to set up a private bank account with us. There is a minimum payment that you need to make into the account to start with of £5,000, but it'll all be fine. And she lost £5,000.
Oh my God!
And you just
and it's just one after the other.
Yeah, it's just one after another, and it was one huge scam.
Yeah,
and she lost sort of £50,000-£60,000.
Yeah.
Going completely off track talking about scams,
Sorry.
but it's no, it's really interesting. What's the difference? Why would I have an appointee over a deputy?
Okay, so
Deputy sounds cooler.
It does sound cooler. In essence, what you're doing is the same. You are helping to support people making financial decisions.
That's a key part of this, isn't it?
Yeah.
Supporting people.
Yeah, it's not you taking over and running their life. It is very much you listening to what they want and engaging them as much as
because
possible.
It still comes
it's
to
their money.
The principles of the MCA.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you support the person to make their own decision? And if not...
Yeah. And then you follow the 5 principles. It's working in conjunction with them. It isn't simply about taking over. So in essence the idea behind it's the same. There are huge differences in terms of the technicalities of it. So with a deputyship, usually the difference is asset levels, although there are other factors. So usually it's if they've got savings or a property. So you would apply to deputyship. For a deputyship, so you could manage those. You essentially, what happens is you apply to the court. There's a whole process involving a COP 3.
Yep.
You also
We're quite good at those.
Yeah, I've heard. You notify the client of what you're intending to do. You have to make a note of their response, which can be quite interesting, as you can imagine, because not everyone's happy about it, as I would empathise with.
COP 14.
Yes,
yeah,
correct. Yeah. You also notify any family members. If there's no family, then it would be social workers and people involved in case they want to raise any objections.
Yeah, I think we discussed this at a conference recently because occasionally we get referred
you
to.
would do.
And I'm sat there thinking, we've only ever met this person once. I'm really surprised that the court would accept this sort of thing.
I mean, usually it's in really sad cases where there's no family involved, and it's so you're looking for you need to notify 3 people. So you're looking for 3 people that have some kind of relationship.
And that's for deputies.
That's for deputyships. And then you usually wait 3 weeks for any response, and then you send off your application. The court will look over it and decree whether they think it's necessary or not. When you get the order, very specific wording as to what you can and can't do, and that is an embossed order accepted by all financial institutions, so you can engage with them and start to kind of manage the assets, as it were. You don't necessarily need assets. It might be that you need to enter tenancy.
I was going to say there's still some rules around, because a lot of people see it's property and financial affairs. That's it. I've got carte blanche.
Yes,
but it's not quite.
No. You would
buying and selling a property.
Yeah, that's very specific. Yeah. I mean, you always had to apply. The process now, quite rightly, has got a lot more complicated and convoluted, but for the right reasons. So now you need a DOLS, deprivation of liberty.
That frustrates me.
Yeah.
Because selling a property and deciding where... So if I worked with a local authority and I was placing somebody into care, I would have to identify what their care needs are,
Yeah.
How those care needs can be met,
Yeah.
i.e. in
Yeah.
a care home. But then I'd also have to prove that those care needs couldn't be met at home.
Yeah.
And then identify that it's therefore in their best interests to be in the care home. Yeah? Whereas somebody could potentially be private, not have anything to do with the state, go into hospital, into a care home, and then without any of that in place have a deprivation of liberties. And a DOLS is the question for DOLS is, does a person have capacity to consent to their care?
Mm-hmm.
They might have, and we see plenty of people that have got DOLS in a hospital setting, let's say, or in a care home setting, but actually their care needs can still be met at home.
Interesting.
So then all of a sudden you've got potentially a deputy that's relying on the DOLS because that's what the courts are saying to rely on. And actually we could go out and we could say, well, you know, Mrs. Smith's got £5 million in the bank.
Yep.
And actually she can afford 24-hour living care.
Yeah.
It would be in her best interest to be at home with 24-hour living care. But that's taken out of the equation almost. I find the fact that the courts rely on a piece of legislation
that
doesn't actually cover residency in that and best interest checklists and things like that. It's really quite bizarre.
Do you know why it came about? It came. My understanding is that it came about because a solicitor had a client who was, at the time, was deemed to lack capacity. He sold the client's house, presumably to pay for care fees.
Yeah.
The client then regained capacity
Yeah.
and said, "Where I want to go home," and the solicitor was like, we need to have a chat."
We happen. The lady had been diagnosed with unspecified dementia. So in other words, we don't know what it is, but she's displaying all the symptoms of a dementia, and we can't get her in for a CT scan. So unspecified dementia. We assessed her. She had no idea where she was. She was confused to time and place. She couldn't understand finances, even on a basic level. She thought it was 1970. She was talking about pence and shillings and things like that. And we assessed that no, she didn't have capacity for residency. We were actually asked to do care assessment, care plan, and best interest checklists, and all those sorts of things. DOLS was in place, and 2 years later, it turned out that it was delirium. Another doctor had identified it, prescribed medication, and there was nothing wrong with this lady at all. Thankfully, the application hadn't progressed, and the sale hadn't progressed, so it was all good. But that's the thing about capacity. It's only ever on a professional opinion. You can only go on the evidence that's available to you there and then. But the DOLS doesn't give you all the evidence that you actually need.
My understanding is that you can apply to sell the property without a DOLS. Yeah. I know Sam Spillett, if she's watching, who you know, Sam, who came to NellieCon, lovely lady, fellow deputy. I know that she's had a number of cases where she's just provided a very convincing argument and reasoning behind it. So they do. You can, as long as you've got sufficient evidence.
DOLS being
and you make an
backlogged in
excellent
some counties by thousands, you know, it's a delay to get the DOLS anyway.
So it can be done, but usually you're going to need a DOLS to sell the property.
So, deputyship is basically a court order, isn't it? You're then placed in charge, and you have to provide a. I remember the name of this word because every time I try to think of this word, I start thinking about dog bounty hunter. Not a bounty. It's an American term. You go to prison and then you pay your. To get out you know that word.
Oh
yeah. No, you.
No.
It's a.
Bail.
Bail.
That's
Thank
the one.
You.
Well done.
Bond. Bail bond. That's it. You pay a bond. Yeah, deputies have a bond.
We do. Yes. Yeah. So for insurance purposes, So if it all goes wrong,
see, we went from a long-haired, blonde-haired thug to
so if it all goes wrong, in theory, you can theoretically there's a security bond to ensure that.
Do you get the same for appointeeship?
No. But interestingly, there is when we had a conference in October and this came up about appointeeship bonds, I would be in favour of them, absolutely.
I think so.
You know,
I mean, if you're being true and honest about being an appointee, then
nothing
to worry about.
Absolutely, and it's just another level of insurance. I think that'd be a great idea. I'm not 100% sure if they're already in existence, but I do know that it came up for discussion at the conference we held.
I know solicitors that I've spoken to have said the same about lasting powers of attorney. And I think absolutely for LPAs there needs to be a higher level of security.
I completely agree. Yeah.
So appointeeship is DWP. Isn't
yeah.
it?
So it's really
OPG,
it's just
it's
purely
not
collection of benefit income, and then the as I say, the principle is the same because you then are looking to spend that money in the client's best interest.
Yeah.
But the primary responsibilities are to make the benefit claim, ensure that you are maximising that claim, that they're getting everything they should be entitled to, and then making sure that that money is spent responsibly and in the client's best interest.
Practical, real basic sense, because I really like basic, from my understanding. Essentially, DWP, they come out, don't they? They check, the DWP themselves send somebody out to
They
check
do, more often than not,
you become the appointee, and essentially the money, instead of getting paid into their bank account,
comes
paid
to
into
us.
your bank account, and then you can set up direct debits for rent and things
we
like
set
that
up
on your account.
For every client we have, they have their own individual bank account.
So but I mean, if I was appointee for my mum, as such,
you could have it paid into yours.
And then because
there's
it's
no
my account, I can then
Absolutely.
agree to the direct, because I couldn't sign. You can't sign off for direct debits to be set up on their bank.
No, absolutely not. And with there are severe limitations to apprenticeships. Often when we're trying, one of the things that's kind of a source of frustration is often we take on clients because they've accrued debts. We have them as appointee. We ring up a utility company or whoever it is to try and clear the debt. They won't engage with us because we're only appointee. The point I always make is like, who
want the money or not?
Who defrauds someone to pay a bill? I mean, if someone did that to me, I would be go ahead, knock yourself out.
If anybody does want to commit fraud by paying me money,
but they have their GDPR regulations in place. I understand why, but it is a bit of a source of frustration.
It is that, isn't it? It's the practicality of life, and the law not quite working together.
So that is one source of frustration. If I could change something, it would be so that they would engage with.
Now I'm thinking about it. I suppose it is. I ring up. Would that work? No. There's no way that you could ring up to pay somebody else's bill and it be negative. I was just thinking maybe if I used your card to ring up and pay Sharon's bill.
Yeah, I mean, I guess...
But that's just fraud.
Yeah.
That's pure
I'm sure there are very
good... If I rang
good...
up and used my card to pay for Sharon's electricity bill, should be well happy. There's no... I can't... Yeah, no, there's no...
But you can... We do have appointeeships where the client's lost capacity, and then you are in kind of stuck because you can't get... The client can't assist.
And the client can't consent to you
consent. So it's sometimes you're kind of stuck where you can't clear any debts because no one will engage with you.
It's difficult that because what the law would say is that, and we've got solicitors on, so correct me if I'm wrong. Just do it quietly and don't let anyone see. But theoretically, anybody can do a capacity assessment. You don't have to be a specific professional, but for those bigger decisions, they would prefer somebody like our team to do those assessments. But theoretically, you could assess that person hasn't got consent to agree for you to talk to British Gas, and therefore it's in their best interests. And British Gas should go with that.
Yeah, very much so. I do have to say,
what the law says.
And this is an example.
But a lot of the companies, they don't really understand.
I generally find when they're owed money, if you wait long enough,
they
get happier to talk to you.
Yeah.
So normally, ultimately, they want to be paid.
Ridiculous for them.
It's
because
a ludicrous
all
scenario.
they would have to do is record very good case notes on their file. So well, actually, an appointee has rang up. They've identified that this person has capacity. They've done that.
I mean, we receive what's called a BF57, and we always send them that. A BF57 is essentially a letter from the DWP to say that our guardian services are the corporate appointee for this client, and they then know that we're receiving their benefit income.
Yeah.
So there is sufficient paperwork for them to engage, but there's the current state of play is that there's no real provision for this.
We've seen it, and I know that a lot of solicitors on LinkedIn have complained about banks and things like that, and I'm not going to name anyone because I don't get sued by banks. But I mean, we as an example, we had a client who she was lonely. There was absolutely nothing wrong with her. She was in her 70s. She was fairly wealthy. Sold a house, moved into a care home. I say a care home. It was an annex attached to the care home. She had oak wooden beams and a beautiful carved wooden bed, and then on the side of that she had her own little living room area.
Lovely.
I mean, it was stunning. I'd be happy living in this as a house.
Yeah.
And but then through the day she had carers that she could speak to. She didn't need carers, but she could speak to them, and she could go and have lunch with people, and she was just happier. She had a better life. So she rang her bank and she said, right, I'm changing my address. And she said, this is my new address, Acorn Care Home Limited. And they went, okay, no worries, we're freezing all your bank accounts. And if you're in a care home, you can't have capacity to manage your finances.
No.
So she then rang us and said, can you come out and do a capacity assessment with me? And I said, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
What I will do, though, is write a letter to your bank.
There's no need.
Screaming at them and explaining the law to them. And I said, and if they don't, I'll quite happily go in branch with you.
Yeah.
I said, I'm not charging for that. I really want to have the argument with them because everything they're doing is completely unlawful. And just because you've changed your name to... what would happen if I set up a care home today? I thought, well, we'll set up a care home. We'll have a little bungalow at the back.
That's
all
it.
of a sudden, all of my accounts are frozen. 45 years old. It's ridiculous, and I think that's some of the issues, isn't it? These large corporations, they don't really understand the mental capacity,
no,
and they have basic training on it. But
one of the big fears I have with the banks is they're all moving to closing down branches. They all want eventually they want all the branches closed down, and that is a big concern for me because we deal regularly. I go, and Philippa as well goes. We go into the banks most weeks. The local teams are amazing.
And they understand.
Yeah, they understand. We've had calls from them to say, your client's here with somebody. We're really concerned.
That
all
feature,
that kind of that personal contact, that personal knowledge, is massive. And what I really worry about is as they start closing these branches, that you will just get kind of wholesale decisions like that. Oh, they don't have capacity. They're in a care home.
Considering the start of this conversation, we were talking about seeing more vulnerable people, more people with mental health problems, more people needing appointees and deputyships, and then society's taking away their resilience, essentially. So we're going to see more abuse. We're going to see more difficulties.
Yeah. Well,
and potentially then creating more vulnerability, more anxiety, more mental health problems, which means more appointeeships, more deputyships.
Well, if you're in your 60s, 70s, 80s, and you habitually go into a bank to withdraw your funds, manage the notion that gets taken away from you, that is taking away your access to funds. For depending on what you're used to, having a number on a mobile phone, we're quite used to it. So that's, for some people, that's meaningless. Unless they can physically access that money, then anything else is just stress.
I'm 45. I'm quite tech savvy. What are they calling my generation? The
Z.
We're that cross. I'm that crossover.
I don't know which one we are. I see it a lot. I haven't worked out.
I think there might be Zennials. That's it, because I'm 1980, so I cross between the millennials and the Gen X, and they've created this sub-generation. Because you were born without IT, without computers, without any of that. But then in childhood, you were brought up with it, and not just brought up with it. You developed as the IT systems and everything else were developing. So we've got this great understanding, but people born just 5 years before haven't. But I'm 45, and some of this technology, I'm looking at it now and just going, that's rubbish. Virtual reality and all of that.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at it going, this is ridiculous. Why would you have that? The back of my brain, I'm going, but in 15 years' time, in 20 years' time, they're going to be looking at it as the same as we look at a smartphone, or we look at a PC or a laptop or anything like that.
I was watching
how excluding that's going to be,
and it was an arena, and they all had digital cameras, and I just thought that you never see a digital camera
where you have to press the button. No,
just a phone.
Yeah, well, your phone is everything.
Yeah.
I mean, when we're assessing people now, we use images and things and diagrams and things like that and little cards. And one of the images is a triangle with 3 pillars and then a pound sign on top, because that's a traditional image of a bank. So I put that in front of you or an 80-year-old, and you'd go bank, and you understand that. And we had a young woman turn around and go, "That's not a bank." And the assessor went, "Well, what do you mean?" And she went, "Well, this is my bank," and pulled up her phone. She'd never been to a bank.
So it meant nothing to her.
She was 19, 20 years old.
Yeah. Mad, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you're showing me a building. The banks aren't in building. I mean, we're with Starling Bank. They don't have a branch.
Yeah.
Even for our direct debit thing, it's some dodgy little office estate in Swansea. It's concerning.
What would she have defined as the symbol for a digital bank?
I don't know. It was an app. So I suppose it's their logo.
Whatever the logo is, yeah.
Yeah, if it's the Starling Bank or the Monzo app, then it's the M or the S or, so how do you... Yeah, and I think you're right, when you're looking at appointeeships, how are they engaging with that if they can't? And the vulnerability that's then creating. Because I suppose if they've got that in that phone, it's accessible. Yeah,
and I guess whether this is part of the reason, but we are definitely seeing more cases where clients require appointeeships because of the anxiety of managing their funds and bills and things. And I do wonder if, because it's now done through the phone, that it's so it's kind of in your face all the time. Before it was letters, you deal with it in your own time, whereas now it's a reminder, a text message. It's kind of like constant, and you can't ever break away from it. And I do wonder if that's a factor.
Those little red dots on the icons and the notifications. The little red dots are red because it gives you an alert in your brain, and that idea of red is based on drug addiction.
Is that really?
Yeah, that's where they've got it.
And also it's got kind of the element of danger.
I'm assuming that so you've got your appointees, you've got the people that you're supporting with deputyships. You're there to support them in making their own decisions when they can, and helping them make those decisions. And when they can't, you have to step in and make those decisions in best interests. When you're stepping in and making those for best interests, they always happy about it?
No. No. I mean, look.
How do you deal with that though? Because you've got the courts and the law saying you can't just let Ryan go off and buy £10,000 worth of cocaine.
Yeah. Not again.
Not again. Not after last time. No, Sean would never do that. So you've got the law saying that he can't do that, and he's going, but it's my life, I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
And it's my money, give me my money.
I would say most days the mediation of those examples is what we deal with. And it's really, really tricky. I think the first thing you need to try and do, I mean, when most of the cases we take over, nobody wants to have anyone manage their money.
No.
And the other thing about it is whether you like it or not, if you're managing their money, by proxy you're managing their liberty and the freedom they have to make choices for themselves, and if they want to go out or they want to do something. So you have to be really empathetic to that and see it from their perspective and say, right, would I be happy with someone managing money? Absolutely not. So A, understand their frustrations. B, understand that one of the things you're going to have to do is build trust with the client and get them to understand that you are doing everything in their best interest. And really that I think there's a couple of things you can do. Time is the first thing you need because it's going to take time, but also just listening to them and trying to see things from their point of view. And when we have cases where they're kind of asking for stuff that we're going to say no to, I just think the best thing you can do is just take the time to explain your decision. Then if they want to come back at you with a rant, etc., listen to their ideas, engage with them, don't just kind of be blocked off.
I was just about to ask actually, because you could potentially one of the things that we have to be really careful with in social work is not parentalising and not sort of, because we're now making decisions on behalf of this adult because they lack capacity, that we're not becoming a parent and taking away all of their
Yeah.
authority and making them feel and then start to act potentially like a child.
Yeah.
Because if you treat somebody as a child, they potentially will go on to act
Yeah.
like a child. So I was going to say, how do you get around not becoming a parent, not parentalising the situation? But I think you've just answered it in the fact that you listen and you explain.
Yeah, and I think if you then explain and then throw it back to them, usually they'll kind of come around to your way of thinking.
Yeah.
So if they want to buy £10,000 worth of cocaine, you might explain that it's not a prudent use of money.
No.
It's quite dangerous.
Yeah.
You're going to be giving money to criminal gangs, etc. You know, if you just talk them through it and then say, look, you know, if you do this, you for the next year, you know, aside from the fact that you might be dead, for the next year, you're not going to be able to go on holiday. You're not going to be able to go on, you know, go and watch.
So it's almost getting them to reflect.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you know, give them your reasoning and say, you know, what's your take on this? And not always, but I think more often than not, they'll say, okay, you know, yeah, you've made a good case.
Yeah.
Clearly, you're looking down the line for me. You know, you want to go on holiday, or you can have season tickets, or whatever you want
So
to
I'll
do.
just have £50 for
Yeah.
this weekend's okay instead. Yeah.
And I think, yeah, then they'll kind of see it from your perspective, and then the thing is, they're making the decision, really. You know, that's the whole point, to support them. Give them all the reasons why you think it's a bad idea, and then.
But that's empowering, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And then you're on a good footing with them. Then you're building trust, and then you can have, you know, really quite. Again, always depends on capacity and things, but you can have more in-depth discussions about
reflecting with somebody and supporting them to make their decision that way. By explaining the consequences and things, by explaining what's going to happen in 6 months, a year's time. Ultimately, you've already made the decision. Such. And they may come back and give you further information, and you may change that decision. But you're the appointee. You're essentially responsible for that decision making. You're the decision maker. But I think it's incredibly empowering that, you know, you're in charge of their finances as such. You're having to manage those, but you're still able to support that person to make better decisions. And potentially in 5-10 years' time, they may have regained that capacity because of that reflection and those skills that you're teaching them over that process.
The Mental Capacity Act, the principles of it, and the Act itself is pretty coherent. And we're really lucky. The team we have were amazing, and more than anything, they care and they're interested in the clients. And just by caring, more often than not, you will naturally follow the guidelines of the Mental Capacity Act. There are also practice directions from the court, which are pretty, again, coherent in terms of things like transparency, conflict of interest, gifts, and things like this. So there's kind of a really good set of instructions to follow. And when I've gone to talks, listened to solicitors, one of the things they've explained in terms of dealing with the court is to be able to show your workings, is a phrase that comes out a lot. Be able to explain the reasons why you've made a decision, why you think it's in the client's best interest. And actually, I find using that tactic with clients is a really effective strategy.
Yeah.
If you just kind of explain away your decision, all the reasons you think it's a good idea, what the long-term benefits are. Yeah. And
because
then
potentially in a year's time, that person's making better decisions.
Yeah.
Because they've learned to look forwards, they've learned to look for the future. So then when they're ringing up and saying, I want money for a motorcycle, straight away they're going, do you know what though? How can I afford? Sean, can I afford this?
Yeah.
And they're starting.
Yeah, then they're starting to think about it. Yeah. So that's really useful. I mean, look, one of the examples that always gets used. In fact, I had a really good example once with a solicitor. She had a client who the family were from the Caribbean, and they were having a family reunion in the Caribbean. And the client wanted to go. This would be a one-off thing. It would be, you know, a kind of cherished memory that you'd have for a lifetime. But limited finances. If he was going, the carer was going to have to go with him. So things get incredibly expensive incredibly quickly. And in the end, the solicitor decided that she didn't think it was a good idea. The cost of it was excessive. And whilst it would have been a very, very nice thing, she didn't feel it was a prudent decision. Now, there's no real right or wrong answer there. I mean, if the client goes on and dies 6 months later, it's probably the wrong answer because they've missed out on a lifetime opportunity. Equally, if they then go on and live 30, 40 years...
It's really difficult, that, isn't
yeah,
it?
you
because
can't
if he
win.
was independent, he might have turned around and gone, well, actually, I can't afford it, so I'm going to go and take out a loan.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
You know, because I think that's, this is one of those things that, well, people do, don't they? You know, if you book a holiday, you don't pay for it up front.
Yeah, absolutely. And undoubtedly, that would have, that decision would have caused them difficulties in that relationship. Yeah. He wanted to go.
Yeah.
She's denied him the opportunity. But you would hope over the course of time that they would then come to realise that because you've been able to buy them, I don't know, adaptations for the home, or something else, that actually that was the right decision.
Maybe,
but really, really difficult, and you can't always know what's right, and what's right for you might seem, just not the right decision from their point of view.
There's an emotional investment in that decision as well, isn't there? It's not. I want a new grab rails for the bathroom because I don't like the colour of them, or something like that. It's not a practical thing.
Yeah.
There's an emotional element there that potentially they may never forgive the deputy for making that decision. I don't envy.
It's really, really tricky. So often you get yourselves into kind of situations where there is no real right or wrong answer, but it's just about, as I say, following the principles, making sure that the reasons behind the decisions you're making are in their best interest, and being able to explain that decision out.
We've seen deputies where I can remember years ago, and when she was telling me it, I kind of went, no, I'm not sure if you'll get away with that. And she was saying that she visits all of her clients face to face because she can charge for the travel. Even if it could be done over the phone, she said, I'll go out and visit them, and I like getting out of the office. And then she said, and when I'm on the way, I can pull into Costa's and get myself a coffee, and I'm allowed to charge for that. And every conversation you had with this particular deputy, it was all about the earning, the profit. And I don't think. I mean, we've spoken about this privately. I don't think you can. If you're supporting somebody as an appointee, as a deputy, if you're assessing the capacity, it has to be about them, doesn't it?
If you want to make profit anyway.
No. Well, I was going to touch on you.
We charge local authority rates.
Charging slightly different for you guys, isn't it?
Yeah, so we do mainly local authority rates.
So there's two charging streams as such as
there are,
professional solicitors that are allowed to charge. I'm not going to say professional deputies because you are professional deputies.
Yeah.
But there's professional solicitors and then there's local authority rate.
There are.
And if you're a member of if I was acting as deputy for my mum,
it would be local authority.
I can charge local authority rate.
Yeah. I mean, you can always make an appeal. And you can, again, try and put a case forward as to why you think, you should be charging different rates. You'd probably struggle if you were a family member, to be fair. And occasionally we've had cases where we're given solicitor rates because of the level of complexity and things. But more, we charge local authority rates.
Do you think that's, considering what you were saying at the beginning, that you're looking at potentially hundreds of thousands of local authorities giving this up?
Yep.
Do you think that's going to change in the future? Do you think it needs to change?
Really? I mean, arguably, I would say yes at one time. Arguably, because the current state of play would be that in order for us to grow, it would just be sheer volume.
Yeah.
And the problem with sheer volume is that you are, every single time you're watering down your engagement with the client, and that's not an ideal situation. So I would argue that moving forward, if this is to become a privatised or a more privatised industry, you would be interested in finding a balance between what you're charging, so that there's a real incentive for the company to deliver high level service rather than be completely preoccupied with just scraping by. Yeah. And if you're completely preoccupied with scraping by, risk, isn't it? Then you drop service levels.
Because then you could end up with individuals going, hey, I can do this. Yeah. And as long as I earn £300-400 a week, I'm happy.
Yep. And but they'll be delivering minimum service.
And if they're charging the local authority rate, they're only £300-400 a week, and they're not particularly interested in providing that person-centred client service, because, well, I'm only earning £300 a week from this, and I've got 3 clients, 4 clients, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm not racing around for them for that little
Absolutely.
amount of money.
So, but obviously, if you're earning huge profits, then you're probably doing it. You're probably charging too much. So there's a real balance to be struck. Hopefully, we'll be able to engage with the court on this and kind of try and find a balance.
I think if
we've written
quite serious safeguarding.
We've written a number of letters to the court. I mean, I don't want to get into too much about it, but one of the things that we're finding is we're having to spend huge amounts of money on IT training, IT security
to provide the same level.
Because the information that we're holding
in the local authority.
Absolutely, and the information you're holding now is it's so valuable. I mean, on our system, we'll have pretty much everything on a client.
Our IT systems.
So we have to have really robust IT security systems, and we spend tens of thousands trying to put those in place. We have monthly training.
And that's the thing, isn't
monthly
it?
training on scams and things.
Dave, who looked after his mum as a deputy, or as an appointee, setting up with no history, no knowledge, and without those systems in place, and without the funds, because he's only charging local authority rate, but all of a sudden he's got 40, 50 people that he's looking after, because his business has just escalated. There's a real risk of all of that data becoming compromised, the service provision being poor, and solely because there's this difference between a solicitor professional and a professional.
But I do understand the reticence from the court. Solicitors have the SRA. It's a highly regulated industry. We aren't regulated.
I was going to ask you about this, because I know you're talking about accreditations and things like that. And we're actually having conversations about capacity accreditations. And stuff.
So I mean, hopefully in the coming weeks and coming months, there will be an announcement on that. We're looking into working with associations and towards regulation.
It's important when you're dealing with anyone else, where your decision making, where you're having impact on their life. Then why shouldn't if you're a domiciliary care company, if you're a care home, you've got the CQC that's saying you're doing everything right, brilliant. And it's not about turning around and saying you're excellent. It's about saying, actually, this isn't quite.
It's consumer confidence. It's consumer confidence. If you're a family member and your money's being managed by somebody, you want to know that there are safeguards in place. Now, naturally, the whole process, because it's a financial business, there are naturally lots of procedures and protocols in place. When we set up bank accounts, we have to provide kind of 5 years worth of history for all the clients and things. All the deputyships are overseen by the OPG. There's oversight from the DWP. A lot of the cases we deal with are either we get loads from safeguarding, police,
so
NHS. So
oversight.
we're open book with that in terms of making sure that they know what we're doing the correct stuff. So there is natural oversight, but there is not a regulatory body, and it needs one. It absolutely needs one. So hopefully we'll look to change that.
We're in a grey area, I suppose, similar to you. All of our social workers are registered with Social Work England. Our psychologists are registered with British Association of Psychology. So they've all got their own individual registrations. But as a private practice, there's nothing that registers. We've got no... as a practice, we're independent from everything, sort of thing. So we talk to Social Working, and I'm having another phone call with them this week. And it's the same for us. We're seeing this development of new private independent social work practices, not just in adult services, but in children's services. And the individual's registered. But theoretically, that means that if an individual causes a difficulty, if an individual's got an issue, they're off. The brand there's no impact. There's no, and that carries on. And you could see that with appointeeships, where you could have somebody appointed as appointee, the company not the appointee, but them employed by it. And we saw it with solicitors, didn't we? It used to be where solicitors were appointed as the named deputy, and then they'd retire, they'd leave, there'd be issues potentially. And there'd be no deputy all of a sudden. But the company
it's a great point,
backing them up, that had been there, there was no harm, no foul.
That is a great point. Longevity, because obviously when you're particularly deputyships, it could be for it's for the lifetime. Once it's granted, there's no end date on it.
Well, funnily, we get asked
So if we take on a kid who's 18,
LPA for health and welfare,
you
and
know,
I've got the exact same. No, we can't do LPA for health and welfare because that's me.
Yeah.
So if you asked me to be your health and welfare, we'd be sitting in the care home together.
Yeah.
And you going, right, Ben, I need you to act as my attorney.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I've paid for you for the past 30 years.
Yeah.
There has to be some longevity.
Yeah, there should be. So, a regulatory body would be super useful in that sense. And again, going back to the bonds.
Just on the appointeeship then. So deputy, our guardian services can be appointed as a trustee, a trust corporation, or any solicitor's firm can be appointed as a trust corporation for deputy for finances.
Yes.
Can you be appointed for appointeeship as the company?
Or
is
we
it
are
a named person?
No, it's our guardian services.
It's our guardian services.
So we are a corporate
that gives
appointee.
you that longevity, doesn't it? Whereas if it's Doris Smith, if she passes away or if she retires, or
my understanding is that above, I might be wrong on this. My understanding is that if you're a solicitor with in excess of 500 cases, it then becomes a corporate deputyship.
Oh, okay.
So it's not a named person. I may well be wrong on that.
Yeah. I don't know. We went through a phase the year before COVID where we were getting solicitors firms ringing up left, right and centre saying we're going over to, we've got a deputy retiring and we've set up a trust corporation. We want all of our deputies assessing, our donors assessing, and it will be sort of 40, 50 people all assessed over the space of the next 6 months sort of thing. That seems to have calmed down.
Okay.
I don't know whether it was I don't know. We'd only been going for 18 months, 2 years, something like that. I wasn't in the know at that point. But yeah, we have seen a calm down of going from named deputy to corporate deputy.
Yeah, I mean, the issue is that on some occasions the maths don't really work. So usually, if it was a solicitor's, usually the named deputy would be the most senior person there, potentially a partner. Now, you only really become a partner once you've been there a long time. Yeah. So if you're managing an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old, the likelihood is you're going to be, looking to retire, because you're a partner, you're doing very well for yourself, etc. So, you being the named deputy isn't massively useful because if you then go off, you've got to
from a business point of view, for us, please don't do trust corporations. Just keep retiring, and we'll keep coming out and doing COP 3 after COP 3 after COP 3.
And it's costly to the client.
Yeah,
so there is
absolutely, and it's like lack of continuity. All of a sudden, there could be if you get a deputy that passes away, there's a gap potentially where nobody's really
it can take anywhere between 3 to 12 months for court order. So who's doing managing the funds in the interim and just the practical arrangements. I mean, if you want to pay, sometimes we get clients with huge carefree debts. If we need to pay those, I need to be going to branch to pay those. Yeah. Because of the sums involved, we have kind of limits in terms of online expenditure and things for security purposes. So you need to physically go into branch. Now, if you start growing and you're the named deputy for 300 it just becomes unmanageable.
Branch,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there is again, there are lots of things that we would love to start engaging with the court on to have discussions.
I'd love to say we've got Judge Hilda on the video watchers, but no, we're not quite up to those heady heights just yet. But we are going to have to cut it, Sean.
That's very quickly.
I know.
Thank you.
Is there any questions? Has anybody got any questions? Thank goodness. For me.
Yes.
No. Is there?
Only Mandy's comments about using AI for picture aids.
Oh, AI for picture aids. Yeah, weirdly, I've spoken to Social Work England and to Tim Farmer this week about our use of AI. And I know this is going slightly off subject, but Mandy's raised it. So everyone's panicking about AI.
Yeah.
And in social work especially, oh my God, AI is going to be used to write all your reports. And they're all just going to be the same, and it's all going to be trash and all of that. We're trying to take a little bit more of a grown-up approach and see how is it. The people are going to use AI. We can't get away from it. It's as simple as that. So how do we implement a policy for tools? So we've been talking about and using it, and then we realised that actually what we can do with AI is sit there in an assessment and use it as a reflective tool there and then. So if I'm assessing somebody that's sort of, say, maybe 20 years old, but they've got the educational age of, say, a 4-year-old, I've explained it how I think is in the most basic terms. But then I can go into ChatGPT we've got our own AI called Mia, and we can explain the situation, explain what we've said, and then say, can you explain this in a more simple term?
Yeah.
And then you can have a conversation back and say, well, actually, can you make it even more simple?
Yeah.
Can you then show me a diagram of
wow,
this?
I mean, it's nuts, isn't it? It's
and then we can show
bonkers.
it to them. So that idea of the bank, if somebody, like you said, you know, what's the image for digital banking? Well, actually, on that, we could go and me and the person sit there and have a conversation to bring up the right image and the right simplicity for them. So we're working on these AIs to support on help supporting the person make their own decisions. It's going to be fantastic. I genuinely think AI's got
it's massive. It'll be.
I mean,
and especially in our industry.
Yeah,
you know, it's a hugely administrative industry.
I think everyone's just panicking that AI means that instead of ringing you and speaking to you, they're going to be ringing you and speaking to Ada.
That's what. What happened when I call our bank.
Yeah, we've got that. It's Metro Bank.
Yeah. She's so convincing.
It's only when you get to the point where you go, are you artificial intelligence? And it goes, I am artificial intelligence. Yes, and you go, I'm creeped
She
out
is
now.
very convincing.
Yeah, very, very convincing. Okay, we won't start on
much.
AI, or I'll be here for another hour. But everyone, thank you to everyone that's joined us today. We hope that you've found it interesting and not just me and Sean giggling to ourselves. Fumi, who have we got on next month? I'm trying to think off the top of my head.
Cindy from ECP.
Oh, yes, we've got our own social worker on. We've got Cindy coming on the sofa. We've only got 2 of our team coming on the sofa this year, so please do join it. We're going to be looking at educational healthcare plan appeals. So it'd be really interesting. It's something that we're quite heavily involved with Nellie Sports, and Cindy is one of our resident experts on EHCPs and special educational needs, so please do join that. We'll be sending out links for that to everybody. And don't forget about NellieCon. Please book your ticket. Please come along. It's going to be bigger, better than ever, and it's going to be amazing. And the recording of this will be published on Monday, sent out to you, and it will be on YouTube with the rest of ours. So Google YouTube NellieSupports.com and it should pop up. Weirdly, if you Google Nellie on the sofa Sean's face pops up straight away. Thank you all for coming.
I paid for that.
You have. Thank you all for coming, and we will see you in, February isn't in March. We'll see you in March 2025. Yes, it will be 2025. Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.